The rain came down like shattered glass, hard, cold, relentless. It blurred the edges of the city until everything looked like a painting bleeding into itself. The neon lights of forgotten shops flickered weakly against the darkness, their colors dissolving into puddles that mirrored the storm above. In that narrow alley, the world was nothing but shadow and sound. Elena Ward stumbled forward, her breath hitching with every step. One hand clutched her side where blood seeped through the fabric of her torn white blazer. The other held tightly to the small fingers of her daughter, Lila. The child's yellow raincoat glowed faintly under the lamplight, a trembling flame in a sea of black. "Please," Elena whispered, voice barely audible beneath the roar of the rain. "Don't hurt me, I can't walk." Her knees buckled, hitting the slick cobblestones with a wet thud. She pressed her back against the cold brick wall, eyes darting toward the alley's mouth where shadows moved, her ex-husband's voice still echoing somewhere behind her, carried on the wind like a curse. Every heartbeat sounded like footsteps chasing her. Lila's teddy bear slipped from her grasp and fell into a puddle, its button eyes staring upward, the water swallowing its tiny stitched smile. The rain ran down Elena's face, disguising her tears. Then, all at once, silence. The wind stopped. The sound of the storm seemed to vanish, leaving only the faint trembling of her breath. A shape emerged from the darkness ahead, tall, still, inhuman. Lightning cracked open the sky. For a fraction of a second, the alley was illuminated in silver fire. The figure stood at its center, his coat rippling in the wind that didn't seem to touch anything else. His eyes burned crimson beneath the shadow of his hood, the kind of red that didn't just glow. It remembered. Elena froze. Her pulse stuttered. She gathered Lila close, wrapping trembling arms around her. "Stay behind me, baby. Don't look." But Lila's small voice broke through the fear. "Mommy, he's not scary. He's sad." The figure stepped closer, boots silent against the wet stone. With every pace he took, the rain seemed to hesitate, slowing until each droplet hung suspended in the air, frozen mid-fall. Elena gasped, her mind unable to reconcile what she saw. Time itself was bending around him. He stopped a few feet away, kneeling slowly. The stormlight caught his features, pale, sharp, unnaturally beautiful. His presence was terrifying, yet something about his stillness felt protective. She flinched when his hand moved toward her throat, a reflex born from years of pain. But his touch never came. Instead, his fingers hovered near the wound on her arm, the air around them humming softly. The bleeding slowed, the pain dulling as if soothed by invisible warmth. His voice came low, resonant, the kind of voice that could command armies or calm nightmares. "No," he said softly but with finality. "I'm not here to hurt you." Elena blinked, disbelieving. "Then what do you want?" The stranger's eyes, molten crimson, met hers. Something flickered there. Sorrow, recognition, an ache centuries deep. "I'm here," he said, his tone shifting, cracking with something human. "To protect my queen." The words hit like thunder, not in volume but in weight. She stared at him, the meaning lost somewhere between terror and awe. Queen? She was no queen, just a woman trying to survive. Yet the way he looked at her, as if she were something sacred, made her heart falter. Lila peeked out from behind her mother's shoulder. "Mommy," she whispered. "He's glowing." And he was. Faint trails of red light coursing through the veins of his hands, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The alley shimmered as if breathing. The stranger, the vampire king, lifted her effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing. The rain hung motionless around them, suspended droplets glowing like stars. His gaze softened as he looked at the trembling woman in his arms. "You've suffered enough," he murmured. "No one will ever touch you again." The air grew warmer. The sound of thunder faded into a deep, distant hum. The world itself seemed to bow to his vow. Elena's eyelids fluttered, exhaustion claiming her. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was the child reaching for the teddy bear, now floating midair, perfectly dry, and the crimson eyes of the monster she had feared, now filled with devotion. The rain began to move again, falling softly, but none of it touched her. The monster she feared knelt, and called her his destiny. Before I tell you what happened next, ask yourself, what if the one you feared most was sent to save you? Morning always came too soon for Elena Ward. The alarm's soft buzz never woke her gently. It dragged her back from restless dreams, back into the small, dim apartment that smelled faintly of rain and stale coffee. The city outside never slept, but in her one-bedroom corner of it, everything felt paused, as if even time pitied her. She moved quietly through the half-dark, bare feet touching the cold floor, careful not to wake Lila. Her daughter slept curled up on the couch, a thin blanket pulled up to her chin, her tiny arm wrapped protectively around a stuffed teddy missing one eye. The music box, the cracked one Elena had inherited from her mother, rested beside her. Every night, It played the same lullaby in a trembling tune that never finished, like it too was tired. Elena bent down and brushed a strand of hair from Lila's forehead. "Just one more sunrise, baby," she whispered. "That's all we need." It was what she told herself every morning, a promise made to keep her standing, one fragile day at a time. She worked 2 jobs, one at a diner, one cleaning offices after hours. Both left her smelling of bleach and exhaustion. Every paycheck disappeared before it arrived. Rent, groceries, bandages, medicine. The bruises she hid under her long sleeves were fading slower these days. Her ex-husband had been out of her life for months, but his ghost still lingered, in the cracks on the wall, in the bruises that never quite healed, in the way her hand flinched when someone raised their voice. When Lila woke, the world always softened. "Mama," the little girl said with a sleepy smile, voice full of morning innocence. "You forgot the jam again." Elena laughed, tired but real. "Then you'll have to remind me, won't you?" They shared toast and jam at a wobbly table by the window, the sun barely peeking through gray clouds. Outside, people hurried past, their umbrellas blooming like dark flowers against the drizzle. Inside, it was the 2 of them, mother and daughter, surviving quietly. Lila talked about everything, her favorite colors, her dreams, her wish to see snow for real instead of on TV. "Will we ever see it, Mama?" she asked. Elena smiled faintly. "One day, when the world's kind again." But her eyes betrayed her. They knew the world hadn't been kind for a very long time. Later at the diner, Elena kept her smile practiced and small. "Morning, welcome to Rose's Cafe," she'd say, pouring coffee for customers who didn't look up. The regulars called her Sunshine, not because she glowed, but because she tried to, and in a world this gray, effort looked like light. When the day ended, she'd collect Lila from Mrs. Porter's apartment next door. The old woman would sigh and say, "You're wearing yourself thin." "Dear." Elena would just smile and reply, "She deserves better than tired excuses." Every night, after Lila's bath, came the ritual, the music box, the lullaby, the whispered stories. "Once there was a brave little bird," Elena would say, "who built her nest in the middle of a storm." "And did the storm hurt her?" Lila would ask. Elena always paused before answering. "No, sweetheart. It tried to. But the bird was clever. She waited for the wind to change." Her daughter would fall asleep before hearing the ending, but Elena always finished it in silence. And when the storm was gone, she still sang. The apartment would go quiet except for the ticking of the kitchen clock. She'd clean up, fold clothes, sit by the window with the lights off, watching the rain blur the street below. She used to love the rain when she was young. Now, it only reminded her of cold nights and louder arguments. Sometimes she would open the small wooden box under her bed, a few folded papers, a photograph of her mother holding a baby version of her, and a letter she had never mailed. It was to herself, written months ago after one of the worst nights. The first line read, "You are not broken. You are just waiting to heal." She'd close it before she could cry. The cracks in the ceiling seemed to whisper old secrets. The apartment felt both safe and haunted, as if it knew her pain and kept it quiet for her. When she finally lay beside her sleeping child, exhaustion claimed her body, but her mind stayed awake. She thought of how close she'd come to giving up, and how Lila's laughter always pulled her back from the edge. The moonlight crept across the room, glinting off the music box. It looked almost alive, like it held a heart of its own, pulsing faintly with each note. She turned the key, and the melody began again, slow, fragile, but constant. Elena closed her eyes and whispered into the dark, "We just need one more sunrise." Her words drifted through the night, soft as prayer, steady as breath. Outside, the city slept, unaware that fate was already moving toward her. Somewhere beyond the rain and the noise and the quiet tragedies of human hearts, something ancient stirred, a promise long forgotten, waiting to be remembered, and in a few hours, beneath the same unending storm, a shadow would kneel before her and change everything she thought she knew about monsters, mercy, and love. She didn't know that her next sunrise would belong to eternity. The night started with thunder. It rolled over the city like a warning, rattling windows and echoing down narrow streets slick with rain. The storm had come sudden and violent, the kind that made the air heavy, like even the sky was holding its breath. Elena ran, barefoot, soaked, clutching her daughter to her chest. She ran. Lila's sobs were soft, swallowed by the rain. Her little yellow raincoat clung to her like a second skin. Behind them came the sound that haunted Elena's nightmares, heavy boots slapping against wet pavement. A man's voice, hoarse and cruel. "Elena, you can't hide from me." She turned the corner too fast and stumbled, her shoulder slamming against a brick wall. Pain shot down her arm. Blood smeared across the stones as she tried to push herself up. The cut from earlier, when he'd grabbed her, when she'd broken free, burned like fire. Lila tugged her sleeve. "Mama, it hurts." Elena forced a breath. "I know, baby, just a little farther." Her legs felt like glass, her lungs like smoke. She glanced around. Empty streets, a flickering street lamp, the neon reflection of a liquor store sign dancing in puddles. There was nowhere to go, and then the alley, a narrow, crooked passage between two old buildings. She pulled Lila with her, pressing them both into the shadows. Her heartbeat drowned out the storm. The man's voice came closer. "You think you can take my kid? You think anyone would want you?" His laugh was broken, jagged. "You're nothing without me." Elena's body trembled. She hugged Lila tighter, whispering, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Her hand slipped on the wet ground. The blood from her arm mixed with the rain, leaving crimson streaks along the stones. The footsteps stopped at the alley's mouth. Then, a shadow fell over them. He stood there, swaying, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes glinting with drunken rage. "There you are," he growled. "You're done running." Elena tried to rise, but her knee buckled. She fell hard, the pain blinding. "Please," her voice cracked. "Please don't hurt me. I can't walk." The words barely left her lips when lightning tore across the sky, lighting the world in silver white. For one heartbeat, she saw everything. His sneer, her daughter's terrified eyes, and something behind him. A figure, still as stone. At first, she thought the darkness itself had come alive, the storm bending around a shape too tall, too composed to be human. His coat rippled though the wind was dead. His eyes glowed faintly, not red like blood, but deeper, like molten garnet buried in shadow. Her ex didn't notice. "Hey!" he shouted, spinning toward the figure. "Back off. This isn't your—" He didn't finish. A sound, or the absence of one, split the air. The world seemed to fold. One second he was there, mid-sentence, rain bouncing off his shoulders. The next he was gone, thrown backward as if the air itself had struck him. His body hit the ground 10 feet away with a dull thud, the water around him rippling out in a perfect circle. Elena froze. She couldn't scream, couldn't move. The stranger didn't look at the man again. His gaze shifted to her, slow, deliberate. The alley darkened around him, as though the shadows bowed in reverence. Lila whimpered, her small hands clutching Elena's sleeve. "Mommy?" Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Don't look at him." The man stepped closer, or rather glided. His boots made no sound against the wet stone. The storm seemed to pause, rain hovering midair. He stopped before her and knelt. Up close, he was both terrifying and heartbreakingly beautiful, the kind of face sculpted by grief more than time. His skin was pale, nearly luminous beneath the stormlight. Strands of black hair clung to his forehead, rain tracing the sharp lines of his jaw. Elena flinched when his hand lifted, expecting pain, but his touch never came as she imagined. Instead, his fingers brushed the edge of her wounded arm, feather-light, reverent. The moment he did, the pain ebbed away, replaced by a warmth that spread through her veins like sunrise under the skin. His voice was low, calm, each word soaked in centuries of sorrow. "No," he said softly. "You've already been hurt enough." She blinked, stunned by the gentleness in a voice that shouldn't have been human. Her lips trembled. Who are you?" He studied her for a moment, crimson eyes glimmering in the frozen rain. "Someone who should have found you sooner." The air shimmered faintly. The puddles around them began to glow, reflections of something unseen. Lila reached out, wide-eyed, and whispered, "Mommy, look." Elena followed her gaze. Where the stranger's fingers touched her wrist, faint light bloomed, a small, intricate sigil etching itself into her skin like a whisper of fire. It pulsed once, then settled, leaving a silvery mark shaped like a crescent entwined with thorns. She gasped and tried to pull away, but the mark didn't burn. It hummed, gentle, alive, like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. The man withdrew his hand. For the first time, he seemed almost human, exhausted, sorrowful, as if carrying a burden that stretched across ages. He stood, rain finally resuming its fall around them. Her ex still lay motionless at the alley's edge, breathing shallowly but alive. "Go home," the stranger said quietly. "He won't find you again." Elena wanted to ask why. Why a monster would protect her. Why she suddenly felt as though fate itself had touched her. But before she could speak, he was gone. The air rippled, and the space where he had stood folded into darkness. Only the sound of the rain remained, soft now, almost forgiving. Elena held her daughter close, staring at the faint mark glowing on her wrist. The sigil's light faded slowly, sinking into her skin, leaving only warmth and the memory of that voice. She didn't know what it meant, or who he was. Only that, for the first time in years, someone had stopped the pain, not to harm her, but to protect her. The storm passed above the alley. the thunder rolling away into silence, and beneath that silence, something ancient had begun to awaken. The night swallowed the city whole as Lucian Varin, the vampire king, carried Elena and her child through the rain. The storm had gentled, but its remnants clung to the air, the smell of wet earth, the hiss of distant thunder, the whisper of fate moving unseen. Elena could barely keep her eyes open. Her body hung between exhaustion and disbelief, her pulse still erratic from fear. Each step he took seemed soundless, as though the world itself cleared a path for him. In his arms she felt weightless, the pain in her leg dulled by something she couldn't name, a strange warmth beneath his cold touch. Lila, small and wide-eyed, walked beside them, clutching her mother's torn coat with one hand and her teddy bear with the other. She kept stealing glances at the tall figure carrying her mother. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice tiny in the hush of the night. "He's not scary." Elena stirred weakly. "Sweetheart." "He stopped the bad man," Lila said, as if reminding her. "He saved you." Lucian's crimson gaze flickered downward, just for a heartbeat. He didn't speak. The rain seemed to hush whenever his eyes moved. They reached the edge of the city where the fog thickened like breath. Ahead loomed a black iron gate twisted with symbols that glowed faintly when he approached. Beyond it, hidden by the mist, rose a manor, vast, silent, carved from onyx and shadow. Its windows burned faint red, like eyes watching from another world. Elena tensed. "Where are you taking us?" His voice came low, calm, and unhurried. "Somewhere safe." "Safe?" she echoed, trembling. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Yes, I am what they fear I am, and yet, it was not me who left you bleeding in the rain." She fell silent. When the gates opened, the mist parted as if obeying him. The manor's doors creaked inward, revealing a vast hall lit by silver fire that danced without smoke. Everything shimmered: black marble floors, velvet drapes, chandeliers of crystal shaped like frozen tears. It was beautiful and terrifying, the kind of place one only saw in forbidden tales. Lila's eyes widened. "It's like a castle." Lucien inclined his head. "It was once." He set Elena gently on a long velvet chaise near the hearth, where a low fire burned blue. The warmth reached her skin instantly, chasing away the chill. Her eyes darted around. The high ceilings, the endless silence, the portraits of people with eyes that almost seemed to move. "I don't belong here," she whispered. "Perhaps," he said, crouching beside her. "But neither did the pain you endured." He tore a strip from his cloak, dipped it into a basin of cool water that shimmered faintly with light, and began tending to the cut on her arm. His movements were careful, practiced, as if this wasn't the first time he'd treated a wound, though centuries might have passed since he'd last done so. His touch was cold, but not cruel. When his fingers brushed her skin, she expected pain, but instead felt calm. The mark on her wrist, the strange crescent sigil, glowed faintly as his hand passed over it. "What is that?" she asked softly. Lucien didn't look up. "A seal," he murmured. "Older than this kingdom. Why me?" At that he paused. The faintest hint of something human crossed his expression. Sorrow, or maybe memory. "Because," he said finally, "you reminded me of what I've lost." The fire crackled quietly between them. For a moment the hall didn't feel haunted. It felt hollow, waiting. She wanted to ask more, but her voice faltered. The exhaustion pressed down, heavy and sweet. Lila climbed onto the seat beside her, curling up against her mother's side, her teddy bear squished between them. Lucian rose, his height casting a long shadow across the floor. "Rest," he said. "No one will find you here." Elena blinked at him through half-closed eyes. "I don't even know your name." "Lucian," he replied, his tone quiet, almost reverent, as if saying it aloud after so long cost him something. "Lucian Varin," she frowned faintly. The name tugged at something in her memory, a story told by frightened people, whispered in markets. The king who walks the night, the one who drinks light itself. Her heart should have raced in fear, but instead, it slowed. "Why would a king save someone like me?" she murmured. His gaze softened. "Because not all monsters are born. Some are made, and some are reminded of their humanity by those they were meant to destroy." He turned away before she could respond, his cloak whispering against the marble. As he walked toward the tall doors at the end of the hall, he said quietly, almost to himself, "Sleep." Elena Ward, "You are under my protection now." The doors closed behind him with a sound like distant thunder. For a long time, only the sound of the blue fire remained, soft, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Elena leaned back, feeling her body give in to the exhaustion. Her mind blurred between fear and confusion, but beneath it all, an odd comfort spread, the kind that came not from safety, but from being seen. She reached out, touching Lila's hair. "He's strange." she whispered. Lila mumbled sleepily. He's kind. Elena smiled faintly, pressing a kiss to her daughter's head. Maybe that's what's strange. Her eyelids grew heavy. The warmth of the fire mingled with the faint hum of something ancient. Magic or memory, she couldn't tell. And then, as she drifted toward sleep, the dream came. Fire. Endless fire. A figure in white standing amid the flames, her hair flowing like smoke. Her face was hidden by light, but her voice, calm, melodic, eternal, echoed through Elena's mind. You were chosen by blood and sorrow alike, the woman whispered. One will heal what the other destroyed. Elena tried to reach for her, but her hands passed through the vision. The woman smiled, sad, knowing, and dissolved into golden ash. The music box melody, her mother's lullaby, played somewhere far away, when Elena's eyes fluttered open. Dawn was just beginning to touch the world outside the manor windows. The fire had died to embers, but the air still felt warm. Lila slept soundly, her little face peaceful, and though she didn't know why, Elena felt no fear, only a strange, fragile certainty that she had stepped into something far larger than herself. For the first time in years, she slept without fear, in the arms of one she should have feared most. The manor's halls, once silent, watchful, now murmured like a storm behind glass. Rumors moved faster than wind, twisting truth into poison. The king had broken sacred law. The king had sheltered a mortal. The king, the immortal ruler of shadows, had fallen for a human's heartbeat. By dawn, the whispers became rebellion. In the grand chamber of obsidian mirrors, the vampire court gathered, a congregation of pale, elegant monsters cloaked in silks darker than night. Their eyes gleamed with hunger, and their smiles were as sharp as their fangs. At the throne's heart sat Lucian Varon, still as carved marble, while fury swirled around him like smoke. She's mortal, hissed one elder, his jeweled hand slamming the table. A fragile creature of breath and dust, unworthy of your shadow, let alone your protection. A human child walks our halls, spat another. A desecration of the blood code. Lucian's gaze swept across them. Cool, unflinching, ancient. The crimson glow beneath his irises flared once, and the entire room fell silent. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, too quiet for a king, but every syllable struck like thunder. She bled for love, he said. That's more than any of you have ever done. The words echoed through the chamber, leaving a tremor of unease in their wake. At the far end of the room, Lady Seraphine, tall, exquisite, her silver eyes glimmering with envy, stepped forward. Her gown shimmered like spilled wine, and her voice dripped honey and venom. My king, she said, bowing low, though her tone carried a razor's edge. Surely compassion is admirable. But infatuation? That is a weakness. You risk the kingdom's respect, and your throne, for a mortal's fleeting life. Lucian's jaw tightened. If strength means forgetting mercy, then perhaps this throne has stood too long. A murmur rippled through the court. Seraphine's eyes hardened. You would defy your counsel for her? Lucian rose from his throne, slow, deliberate. His shadow stretched long across the marble, splitting the torchlight in two. I would defy eternity, he said, for what is right. The nobles recoiled, some whispering prayers to old gods, others muttering rebellion under their breath. Seraphine curtsied again, her movements elegant, but her smile brittle. As you wish, my king. But her eyes, bright, cold, and full of calculation, promised retribution. Far from the court's venom, Elena wandered the manor's garden, her bandaged arm aching faintly in the soft light. The air smelled of night-blooming roses and rain-soaked earth. It should have been beautiful, yet she felt trapped, a fragile soul inside a cage of gold. The walls whispered. The servants stared. And though Lucian had said she was safe, she could feel the hatred curling through the corridors like fog. Lila ran ahead, her laughter echoing, a sound too pure for a place so haunted. Mama, look! He's flying! Elena's breath caught. Perched atop the courtyard fountain was Eric's, Lucien's nephew, barely 16 in appearance but a century old. His silver hair glimmered under the moonlight, and his black wings stretched wide before folding back neatly. He landed gracefully, bowing slightly to Lila with a mischievous grin. You caught me, he said, but only because I wanted to be caught. Lila giggled, holding up her teddy bear like a prize. You look like an angel! Eric smiled faintly. If angels drink blood and argue with kings, then perhaps. Elena approached cautiously. She shouldn't be here, she murmured. Eric's turned, his tone softening. Your daughter brings more life to this place than the sun ever could. My uncle. He hasn't smiled like this in years. Elena looked down, uncertain. He shouldn't risk himself for us. For me, Eric studied her, eyes sharp yet kind. You think he had a choice? She frowned. No one has to save anyone. Perhaps not, Eric said. But some of us see the world bleeding and can't help but stop the wound from spreading. The words echoed something Lucien might have said. It made her chest ache. As the evening deepened, Lucien appeared at the edge of the courtyard. His gaze found them easily, the mortal woman and the 2 children laughing in a place that had forgotten how. Something fragile stirred in him, something dangerous. Eric's, he said, his tone half warning, half amused. The boy bowed dramatically. I was only teaching your little guest about vampire etiquette, Uncle. Lucien arched an eyebrow. And what lesson was that? Eric grinned. That sometimes the monsters aren't the ones with fangs. Lucien didn't answer, but for a fleeting moment, his lips curved into something almost like a smile. Elena saw it, and despite her fear, she smiled back. But peace never lingers where envy breathes. In the tower above the great hall, Lady Seraphine stood before a mirror framed in bone. The glass rippled like water, showing visions. The king walking beside the mortal woman, her child laughing in his garden, light returning to a house meant for shadow. Love, she hissed, her beauty twisting for a second into something sharp and desperate. That's what he calls it now? Behind her, a pale servant bowed low. The council grows restless, my lady. They say his mercy will doom us all. Seraphine's fingers trailed along the mirror's surface. Mercy is a flame, she whispered, and fire consumes all it touches. Her reflection smiled back, cruel and perfect. If purity must be restored through blood, then so be it. That night, Elena sat in her chamber, staring out the tall window as the storm returned. The manor lights flickered with the wind. Lila was asleep, curled up in the large bed, her teddy clutched tight. Elena couldn't rest. The unease had grown all day, eyes watching her in corridors, whispers silenced when she entered a room. Even the servants, who bowed respectfully before Lucien, avoided her gaze. She turned the cracked music box in her hands, letting its broken lullaby hum faintly through the darkness. The sound steadied her breath, until a soft tap at the door made her freeze. Lucien? She called. No answer. The wind sighed. Another tap. Cautiously she rose. Every instinct told her not to open it, but the sound came again, softer, slower, deliberate. She approached, her bare feet cold against the stone floor. When she pulled the door open, the corridor beyond was empty, but something had been left on the floor. A bouquet of roses, dark as wine, their petals glistening wetly. At first, she thought they were merely crimson, but as she bent closer, her breath caught. The dew on their petals wasn't water. It was blood, and pinned to the stem was a single glimmering silver thorn, shaped into the sigil of the old vampire houses. Her stomach turned cold. She had seen that symbol once before, drawn into the marble near the throne room, an ancient mark of execution. She reached out with a shaking hand. Her fingers brushed the bloom, and crimson stained her skin. The music box stopped playing. Somewhere deep in the manor, a clock struck midnight, long, heavy, and echoing. Elena backed away from the door, the roses trembling in her hands, her pulse hammering. The mark was clear. The court had spoken. The mortal woman sheltered by the king would not live to see another dawn, and in the shadows of the upper balcony, unseen by mortal eyes, Lady Seraphine smiled faintly as she watched from afar. Her whisper carried on the wind, soft and poisonous. Let's see how far mercy can protect you now. My queen. The night after the blood-marked roses appeared, the manor was quieter than it had ever been. The wind held its breath outside, and every candle burned lower, their flames trembling as if afraid to listen. Elena hadn't slept. The roses lay on her desk like a wound, their crimson petals refusing to die. Every time she tried to close her eyes, she saw the sigil again, carved into the silver thorn, and the message whispered in its silence. You are not welcome here. She sat near the fire, Lila asleep in the bed behind her, clutching the worn teddy bear. The faint melody of the cracked music box played, broken notes that somehow kept her anchored. But tonight, even that sound felt strange, too familiar, like something she had once heard in another life. When the door creaked open, she turned sharply. Lucien stood there, tall, solemn, the faint scent of rain clinging to him though he hadn't stepped outside. His eyes, those crimson mirrors, seemed softer now, shadowed by something old and aching. You found the roses, he said quietly. You knew. Her voice trembled with disbelief and exhaustion. You knew they'd do this and you let it happen? I cannot control fear, he replied, stepping closer. Only power. And they fear what they don't understand. Her hands clenched around the armrest. Then make them understand. Make them stop. He looked at her for a long moment. Would you have me rule with terror again? She blinked, caught off guard. If it keeps my daughter safe? Yes. The silence that followed was heavy. He studied her as if searching for something he had once known. Finally, he said softly, "You sound just like her." "Who?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he crossed the room and stopped before the fireplace, staring into the flames. "There's something you should see." He extended a hand. Hesitant but drawn by something deeper than fear, she took it. The mark on her wrist, that crescent and thorn, pulsed faintly as their fingers met. In an instant, the firelight shifted. The shadows lengthened, and the room dissolved around her. The warmth vanished, replaced by a swirl of candle smoke and whispers. When her vision cleared, they stood in a vast underground chamber. Stone pillars rose high, wrapped in silver veins that glowed faintly. Books, scrolls, and relics filled the space, untouched by time. "The Hall of Echoes," Lucian said quietly. "It remembers everything this world forgets." He led her toward a long stone table covered in scrolls so ancient they looked like they might crumble at a breath. At its center lay one unfurled, glowing faintly with crimson ink that pulsed like a living heart. He touched the edge reverently. This was written when the first dawn still burned on this land. The prophecy of my kind, and yours. Elena leaned closer, trying to read the words carved in two languages, one human and one not. The letters shimmered as though alive, forming into lines she could suddenly understand. "When the Queen of Blood falls to man's cruelty, she shall return as a mortal mother to save the immortal heart." Her lips parted. "The Queen of Blood," she whispered. "That sounds like—" Lucian's gaze met hers. "You," she stepped back. "No, that's impossible." He followed slowly, not threatening, but his voice carried the weight of centuries. 1,000 years ago, before this kingdom drowned itself in blood, there was peace, and there was love. His eyes darkened with memory. "I was not always the monster they feared. I had a queen, a human. She was warm where I was in the shadows. She believed mercy could tame eternity." He reached toward the air, and as he did, the chamber's light shimmered, forming an image, a woman in white, standing beside a younger Lucian. Her smile was soft, her eyes full of the same quiet fire Elena carried. "She died protecting me," he said quietly. "A hunter's blade, silver through her heart. She fell in my arms, and with her last breath she said, 'You will find me again.'" The illusion flickered, fading into smoke. Lucian looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, the immortal king seemed fragile. "I thought I'd forgotten the sound of her heartbeat, until the night I found you in the rain." Elena's throat tightened. "You're saying I'm her? I'm saying your heartbeat is the same. Your courage, your eyes, your defiance, all of it." She shook her head, retreating a step. "I'm not her. I'm not some reincarnated queen. I'm a mother, a broken one. I bleed, I break. I'm no one." Lucian's voice softened, almost pleading. "You bled for love. That is what she did. That is what the prophecy spoke of. A mortal mother who would teach the immortal heart to feel again." Elena turned away, tears welling. "No, you're just desperate to believe it. Maybe you see her ghost in me, but I'm not her." "I can't be." Lucian's expression tightened, pain flickering through his perfect composure. "Then how do you explain the mark?" She looked down at her wrist, the faint crescent sigil that still glowed beneath her skin. "You were chosen the moment I touched your hand," he continued. "The seal of blood does not appear without reason." Elena swallowed hard, shaking her head. No, there has to be another explanation. Magic, trickery." Her words faltered when the air shifted. A faint sound filled the chamber, the soft, fragile tune of a lullaby. Her heart stopped. The music box. It was still in her room. Yet here, in the depths of this forgotten hall, the same melody floated through the air, clearer, fuller, exactly as it was meant to sound before time had broken it. Lucian froze. His eyes glistened. "That song," he whispered. "She used to play it for me. Every dawn we shared." Elena's knees went weak. The sound tugged at something deep in her. Not memory, not logic, but emotion that belonged to another life. Images flickered in her mind. A hand entwined with hers. Laughter under a red moon. A promise whispered in blood and light. She stumbled, clutching the table for balance. I know this song," she breathed. Lucian stepped closer, voice trembling now. "Because you sang it once, for me." The music grew louder, wrapping around them like warmth returning to a frozen heart. Tears slipped down Elena's cheeks. The melody wove through her mind, unlocking fragments. A woman's scream, a flash of silver, a pair of crimson eyes filled with grief. Her breath hitched. "Lucienne," he caught her hand gently, his thumb brushing over the sigil. "You don't have to believe in destiny," he murmured. "It believes in you." The glow around them dimmed, leaving only the firelight's pulse. Elena stared at their joined hands, the mortal and the immortal, the past and the present, everything she had endured, the pain, the fear, the endless fight to protect her daughter, suddenly aligned with something far greater. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a circle closing. She thought of the dream, the woman in white whispering, "You were chosen by blood and sorrow alike." Elena lifted her gaze, eyes shining through tears. "All this time, I thought I was just surviving." Lucian smiled faintly, sadness and reverence in his tone. "You were remembering." The music box's final note echoed through the chamber before fading into silence. Elena's heart steadied. She no longer felt lost. Not broken, just seen. She looked at Lucian, the one she had once feared, the one she had somehow always known. She was not chosen by him, she whispered, her voice trembling but certain. She was chosen by fate. The storm began with no warning. Thunder cracked open the heavens, and the first strike of lightning split the night sky in half. From the high towers of the Varan Manor, the guards shouted. Bells rang, shrill, desperate, echoing through corridors that had never known fear. It wasn't the storm they feared. It was what moved with it. Shadows, too many to count, slithered across the fields below. The rebel covens, led by Lady Seraphine that had come, cloaked in mist and malice, they swept toward the castle like a tide of black fire. Inside the manor, chaos bloomed. Lucian strode through the great hall, his cloak whipping behind him. "Seal the gates," he commanded. "Bring the mortals to the east wing." The soldiers scattered. Lightning flared again, illuminating his face. Grim, controlled, yet burning with an ancient fury he hadn't unleashed in centuries. He could feel her, Seraphine. Her presence was like poison in his veins. In the nursery above, Elena clutched Lila tight as thunder roared. The little girl whimpered, pressing her face against her mother's neck. "It's just the rain," Elena whispered, though her own heart trembled. "We're safe." A lie, but one she needed to believe. The windows rattled. Somewhere below, glass shattered. Screams rose from the lower halls, sharp, brief, silenced too soon. The door burst open. "Lady Elena!" cried Eric's, breathless. Blood splattered across his collar. "You have to move." "They've breached the west wing." Elena rose, limping, holding Lila close. "Where's Lucian?" "Fighting," Eric said, his fangs glinting faintly. "He said to protect you. Come, hurry." They raced through corridors lit only by flashes of lightning. The marble floor was slick with rain and blood. The manor groaned like a living thing under siege. Then, a hiss. From the shadows ahead, a figure stepped forward, face half hidden beneath a crimson hood. "Running so soon, little human?" Eric's froze. "Seraphine." She smiled, beautiful and terrible. "You should have stayed in your grave, boy." Before Eric's could draw his blade, she vanished in a blur. The air screamed. He hit the wall, his body crumpling to the ground. Elena screamed. "Eric's!" Seraphine turned toward her, her fangs bared, her eyes glowing white through the stormlight. "The king's mortal toy. I've been looking forward to meeting you." She stepped closer, her boots clicking against the stone. "He calls you queen." "How quaint." Elena held Lila behind her. Her leg burned with pain, but she didn't back away. "You don't have to do this." "Oh, I do." Seraphine's tone was light, almost playful. He forgot his place. "You are my reminder to him of what happens when kings fall in love with prey." Outside, thunder cracked again, but it wasn't thunder. Lucian slammed through the west gates, sword in hand, his eyes burning crimson. Lightning curved along the blade as if the storm itself bent to him. "Find Seraphine," he roared. The soldiers scattered. Shadows lunged from the rain, but none reached him. His fury burned too bright. Every strike, every movement was a blur of dark fire and silver. For centuries he had restrained himself. Now, the monster the world feared had returned. Not for vengeance, but for love. And still he felt it. The pull in his chest, the heartbeat that wasn't his. Elena. In the courtyard, Seraphine raised her arm. Blood swirled around her fingertips, forming a blade made of pure crimson light. Elena's breath came short. "You were born from fear," she said quietly, voice trembling but sure. "But I was reborn from love." Seraphine laughed. Cold, cruel. "And love burns, my dear." She struck. Elena shoved Lila aside. The blade sliced through her shoulder. Pain exploded white hot, but she didn't fall. Instead, she swung the broken iron rod she'd grabbed from the ground, catching Seraphine across the face. "You dare?" Seraphine snarled, her beauty twisting into fury. Elena staggered back, bleeding heavily. "I dare," she gasped. "Because someone has to." Seraphine lunged, too fast to see, and then a sound tore through the night. The hiss of steel through flesh, the crack of power unleashed. Lucian appeared behind her, his sword buried deep in her chest. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Seraphine's eyes widened, disbelief, betrayal, then horror as crimson light poured from the wound, burning brighter, consuming her. "You were always meant to die by my hand." Lucian said softly. Her body convulsed, light spilling from her mouth, her eyes, her veins. The curse that had chained his kingdom for centuries, born of her blood, broke like shattered glass. The storm screamed. Lightning struck the courtyard, fire cascading down the pillars. Seraphine's scream faded into nothing but dust. Lucian turned, and the world fell silent. Elena lay on the ground, her dress soaked red, her body motionless. Lila knelt beside her, sobbing. Lucien dropped his sword and fell to his knees beside her. No. Her eyes fluttered open weakly. You came. He caught her hand, his voice breaking. You cannot leave me twice. She smiled faintly, reaching to touch his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, leaving streaks of blood on marble skin. Then live, she whispered. For both of us. A tear fell, his, hot and human, onto her lips. As her hand fell away, the rain stopped. Above them, the storm clouds parted. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the moon turned gold. The light spilled across the courtyard, washing away blood and ash. The roses in the garden bloomed, pale white, their petals glistening like dawn. Lucien bowed his head over her still form, his body trembling. The curse, centuries of darkness, melted into the night air. The storm was over, but for the king who had found his queen again, the silence that followed was both salvation and sorrow. The sun rose slowly over the Varen kingdom, the first true sunrise in 1,000 years. Its light slipped through broken clouds and spilled across the once dark towers, gilding every stone in gold. For centuries, the castle had known only shadow, its halls echoing with whispers and regret. Now, warmth returned, hesitant at first, like a child learning to walk, then radiant, unstoppable. In the great hall, silence reigned. The court, ancient, immortal, and proud, knelt as one before their king. Lucien stood at the head of the marble dais, bathed in sunlight. The glow touched his pale skin, and for the first time it didn't burn. His crimson eyes shimmered not with hunger, but with life. He looked up at the stained glass window, the one that had been sealed shut for centuries. The golden light refracted through it, scattering fragments of color across the floor. It felt almost like her laughter made visible. "My king," whispered an elder, bowing deeply. "The curse is truly broken." Lucian's voice was steady, though softer than it had ever been. "No curse lasts where love chooses to remain." The words rippled through the chamber like prayer. He turned and walked down the steps, past the kneeling nobles who once plotted rebellion. None dared meet his gaze. They didn't see a ruler born of fear anymore. They saw a man who had loved enough to unmake eternity. Outside, the courtyard had transformed. The storm's ruin was gone. In its place, new life bloomed. Crimson roses, the color of her blood and his salvation, lined the garden paths. And there, running barefoot through the grass, her laughter scattering like sunlight, was Lila. She darted between marble pillars, chasing butterflies that had returned with the dawn. Her yellow ribbon fluttered behind her, her cheeks flushed with joy. "Papa Lucien," she called out, her small voice carrying through the courtyard. Lucien smiled, truly smiled, and knelt as she ran into his arms. He lifted her easily, holding her close. "You're not supposed to be outside before breakfast," she giggled, looping her arms around his neck. The garden woke up. "You said I could see it when it did," he chuckled softly. "So I did." Her eyes sparkled, sunlight and innocence intertwined. "Mama would have loved it." Lucien froze for a heartbeat, then nodded, his throat tightening. "She does," he murmured. "Every bloom is her." Lila pointed toward the hill beyond the courtyard, where a great tree stood, its branches heavy with crimson blossoms. Beneath it, the morning light shimmered like a heartbeat. "She's waiting," the child said with the solemn certainty only children carry. Lucien set her down gently. "Go inside, little one. Eric's will show you the sunlit halls." "But you're coming too?" she asked. In a moment, she nodded, pressing her small teddy bear into his hand. "So she's not lonely?" He smiled faintly. "Thank you, Lila." When she ran off, her laughter echoing through the air, Lucien turned toward the hill. The walk to the tree felt longer than it should have. Every step seemed to replay the storm. The blood, the rain, the sound of her voice breaking through it all. He reached the summit as the wind carried the scent of roses and earth. Beneath the great tree, a marble tomb rested, simple, unadorned, except for one small object placed at its center, a silver music box. He knelt beside it. The grass was soft, damp with morning dew. His reflection shimmered faintly in the polished stone. He reached out and turned the key. The lullaby began, the same one she'd played for her daughter every night, the same one his lost queen had once sung to him, long before time had turned to darkness. The melody carried across the wind, weaving through the branches and the castle walls. Lucien closed his eyes. She burned once for survival, he whispered, and forever for love. The words caught in his throat, trembling between grief and grace. He pressed the small teddy bear beside the music box, his hand resting on the cold marble. "Do you know what they call you now?" he said softly. "The Rain Queen." He looked up at the blossoms above, crimson and white, swaying gently. "They say when it rains and the wind grows soft, you walk among them, a queen of two worlds, the mortal who taught immortals to feel again." Sunlight broke through the clouds, bathing the tree in gold. For a moment, the petals glowed brighter, shimmering as though touched by unseen hands. And there, carried in the whisper of the breeze, came a sound that wasn't the wind, a voice, soft and warm. "You're not alone, my love. You never were." Lucien's eyes glistened. "Nor will I ever be." He rose slowly, gazing toward the horizon. The sun was higher now, painting the world in living color. Children laughed in the gardens. Bells rang in the city below. Peace had returned, not through conquest, but compassion. He turned one last time toward the tomb, his heart steady, his voice low. "You taught me how to live, Elena. Now I'll teach the world." The music box played its final note, a soft, lingering hum that melted into birdsong. The petals from the crimson tree drifted down, spiraling through the air. One landed on his palm, glowing faintly before dissolving into light. And as Lucien walked back toward the castle, sunlight on his skin, love still burning in his chest, the legend of the Rain Queen was born. They said she was a mortal who faced monsters and taught them mercy. They said she burned once to survive, and forever, to make the world remember love. Would you still beg for mercy, if the monster you feared knelt to protect you? The voice is soft, distant, carried over the sound of rain and thunder fading into dawn. A pause. The music swells, slow piano, strings trembling with emotion. Because once, a woman did, and her kindness turned a kingdom of predators into believers. A faint image flickers across the screen, Elena's hand reaching toward Lucien's, the storm frozen mid-air around them. Then, the music box begins to play, its melody echoing through gold light and crimson petals drifting across the frame. The scene fades, the courtyard now bathed in sunlight, the great crimson tree blooming over her tomb. Children's laughter echoes faintly in the distance. "She wasn't born a queen," the voice continues, softer now, almost a whisper. "She became one, the moment she chose compassion over fear." The last shot lingers on Lucien standing beneath the tree, sunlight spilling over his shoulders. He looks up toward the sky, where two worlds, mortal and immortal, finally share the same light, fade to black. The Rain Queen, after a breath of silence, a gentle outro follows. A single raindrop falls on the music box, and it begins to play again. If you believe love can tame darkness, and mercy can crown even the broken, the narrator's tone turns warm, intimate. Subscribe for more stories where hearts find light in the storm.